Foreign Minister Oliver Joseph, Foreign Minister Pedro Bura Villa, and now we are to meet the third and of the three new foreign ministers representing the Gs in the OAS, the Foreign Minister of Guyana, His Excellency Hugh Todd. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair Sir Saunders. I had the pleasure of meeting you in Georgetown, Guyana several years ago, many years ago, at the Oasis Cafe. You may not have remembered, but I did an interview with you on UNISUR. So it's a pleasure to meet you in a different capacity. I know you're a long-standing diplomat, and now you're Foreign Minister again and a member of the OAS. So it's a pleasure meeting you this evening, Mr. Chair. Esteemed colleague ministers of foreign affairs, heads of delegation, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Assistant Secretary General, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Georgetown, Guyana. First, please allow me to bid you greetings on behalf of our newly elected President, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, and the people of Guyana. First of all, Mr. Chair, I'd like to commend the Assistant Secretary General Mendez and his team for the excellent technical arrangements made to ensure the success of this unprecedented virtual General Assembly. I'm pleased to meet, albeit virtually, my colleague foreign ministers and other heads of delegation for the first time since being appointed foreign minister, and I look forward to many more fruitful engagements in the future. Mr. Chair, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to have a most negative impact on development of our countries, overturning the gains made towards attaining the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, while disrupting economic growth and increasing poverty and inequality. And any further delay in bringing this pandemic under control and alleviating the extreme economic distress our countries are experiencing will result in a deepened crisis involving an increased debt burden. Also, a worsening unemployment situation and continued challenges to the provision of education to our children and young people, as well as a weakening of our ability to deliver adequate health care, among other essential services. It is therefore imperative that an organization like the OAS help to find lasting solutions to existing hurdles that have impeded and continue to impede our progress towards a progressive and sustainable development trajectory. And even as we endeavor to ensure that all four pillars of the OAS remain on equal footing. Mr. Chairman, Guyana, like many other countries of the Hemisphere, is committed to upholding the principles of democracy and the rule of law. It is in this regard that I extend on behalf of the government and people of Guyana to Secretary General Luis Almargo and officials of the General Secretariat, in particular, the Department of Electoral Cooperation and Observation, as well as the member states of the organization. Sincere gratitude for the support provided during the recent electoral crisis, which culminated with the will of the Guyanese people being respected and democracy and rule of law triumphing after 5 tense long months. We especially wish to express our appreciation for the role played by the Chief of the Electoral Observation Mission, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Most Honourable Bruce Golding, and the members of the Commission for their unwavering dedication throughout the protracted process. Mr. Chairman, it should come as no surprise to anyone that Guyana is very concerned about the increasing challenges to democracy in the hemisphere and around the world. Many of these exacerbated by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a consequence of the pandemic, more than 67 countries and territories have had elections postponed, and more than 80 countries have declared a state of emergency, with a consequent deterioration in the quality of democracy and respect for human rights in most of those countries. On the other hand, during this period, 11 countries have become democracies. I therefore posit that a collective vigilance and mutual support, and with the right amount of political will and citizen participation, democracy can prevail. We must therefore monitor ourselves daily for any regression from upholding the principles of democracy and human rights, as we must be careful, moreover, not to allow the fragilities and vulnerabilities of our countries, particularly our small developing countries, to be completely undermined by this pandemic. Mr. Chairman, Guyana, like so many other countries, has refocused its priorities to deal with the health crisis affecting our people and the dire economic impact on our people's livelihoods. None of us in a position to conduct business as usual. If the popular phrase, "we are all in this together," is to have any real meaning, then we must all come together, large and small, industrialized or developing economies, to pursue collective solutions to one of the greatest existential threats of the 21st century. Guyana sees the OAS as strategically positioned in Washington, D.C., right next to the world's leading international financial institutions and the Inter-American Development Bank. And we therefore urge the OAS not just to carry on with its relatively small development programs and valuable scholarship opportunities, but also to do its utmost to address the problems that we face as small developing countries. In this respect, my delegation fully supports the framework strategy document, From Vulnerability to Resilience, and its accompanying actions, a collaborative effort between the Secretary General and the CARICOM Caucus of Ambassadors, as a roadmap that would see the Secretary General playing the role of key interlocutor and advocate to our countries. To our country's behalf, with international financial institutions in Washington, D.C., and other development partners. I thank the Secretary General most sincerely for agreeing to champion our interests during this period of grave uncertainty. And I urge member states, especially those with greater resources and those who sit on the high councils of the developed world, to recognize our needs and support more humane and realistic plans, not only to help us recover from the onslaught of the pandemic, but also to build resilience and sustainability in the face of other previous challenges and exogenous shocks, such as climate change, environmental degradation, and natural disasters. Mr. Chairman, climate change continues to be one of the greatest existential threats to Guyana and countries within this hemisphere. I am therefore pleased to note that the resolution spearheaded by the delegation of Barbados and co-sponsored by all 14 CARICOM countries at the OAS and 9 other member states, advancing under the theme "Advancing the Hemispheric Response to Climate Change," is in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, will be adopted at the end of our deliberations. Mr. Chairman, our hemisphere is also faced with challenges. In the context of the multidimensional nature of security, given that transnational organized crime, corruption, narco trafficking, cyber attacks, terrorism, and violent crime continue to impair our capacity to ensure that our societies are free from these scourges. My delegation is mindful of the fundamental differences which may exist in our acceptance of the interrelated nature of these challenges, but nevertheless calls on the entire membership of the OAS to acknowledge and collaborate, and to acknowledge that a collaborative and cohesive approach in the meeting of these challenges will provide the greatest benefits for all. Mr. Chairman, Guyana has had the distinct honor and privilege of chairing simultaneously the Permanent Council from January 1st to March 31st, and the Inter-American Council for Integral Development from January 1st to June 30th. We not only oversaw the process to elect the Secretary General and the Assistant Secretary General, but also had to contend with the challenges presented by the 5 months of the coronavirus pandemic. I would also like to thank all member states for their tremendous support during our twin chairmanships, and Ambassador Riyad Instanali for his effective and excellent leadership in steering these bodies successfully at a particularly challenging time for us all. Guyana intends to continue to play its part as a responsible member of the hemispheric community in helping to advance a coherent hemispheric agenda based on the 4 pillars of the OAS. Even in the midst of the current crisis, Guyana anticipates exponential growth in the next 5 years as a result of the benefits that are expected to be derived from our oil and gas sector, the proceeds of which will be used responsibly for the benefit of all Guyanese. In this respect, I take this opportunity to ensure all regional partners that Guyana will play its role to support energy security in the Caribbean and contribute to further development of the energy and climate partnership of the Americas. I also wish to give the assurance that Guyana's election by acclamation to serve as Vice Chair of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism at its 20th regular session held on September 25th last will provide another opportunity for us to contribute towards ensuring that the Hemisphere's security agenda is further strengthened. Mr. Chairman, while we remain hopeful that we will overcome this pandemic, though we know not when, there is also need for efforts towards reducing global and societal inequalities, which have become more pronounced with the advent of this virus. As we look forward, we hope towards the dawning of a brighter future. Efforts should be geared towards anticipating and preventing future outbreaks, while providing quality health care, housing, potable water, and access to education for all. Mr. Chairman, the OAS remains the principal forum for political dialogue in this hemisphere. This rules-based institution must pursue consensus building, especially on the pressing issues that continue to confront us. Bearing in mind the principles enshrined in our charter, we must set aside the notion that there are separate rules for some and another set for others, and recognize that whatever the prevailing circumstances, now or in the future, this body must be ever mindful that the charter must be applied equally across the board. In this respect, Guyana continues to value multilateralism and the role played by the OAS. We remain committed to ensuring that the 4 pillars of the OAS, democracy and good governance, the promotion and protection of human rights, the pursuit of integral, sustainable, and equitable development, the multidimensional security needs of countries are addressed and bear equal treatment if we are to confront the challenges of the present and the future. I thank you.
thank the distinguished Foreign Minister of Guyana, and